You are all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call to order the Anne Reynolds School Project Building Committee. This is a special meeting. I believe what you're seeing on your screen is regular meeting, but it is a special meeting. It is August 12th, and it's about 5:17. Jeff, could you do the roll call, please?
Yes, members are asked to signify their presence when their name is called. Councilor Camillo.
Here.
Councilor Minor.
Here.
Mr. Sylvia. Ms. Stamm. Ms. Dugan.
Here.
Mr. Wetzel.
Here.
Mr. Woods.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Jeff. Next item of business is public participation. And you have a couple ways that you can talk to us. If you are coming to us via Zoom, just raise your hand and we will recognize you so you can speak. Or I believe you could do *9 and that will raise your hand, or you can call in a toll-free number at 888-788-0099. And there's a webinar ID, which you'll see on our screen.
We do have two individuals.
I see two. Brian Haggerty, I will recognize you first. Your first one to have your hand up. And
Can you hear me?
we can now.
All right. Brian Haggerty, 529 Fenn Road. I just had some general questions. Last week, I noticed on one slide, the space overage was listed at 3.7 million, and on a different slide, it was listed at 4.7 million. I was just curious which numbers was correct. And kind of the follow-up of that is, when would the town know from the state if this grant or space waiver would be allowed? Another question is the new construction costs. Would that include big ticket items such as like new ball fields, new playgrounds, old building demo? And what are some potential big ticket items that are not listed in that new construction cost? And I would just say that I think we all share the very same goal here, which is to create the best, most conducive learning environment for our kids in the quickest manner possible and as cheaply as possible. I think Newfield has said that at least a new construction would finish ahead of a renovation, either without a referendum. I think, the big if at this point is, what are these new construction costs going to be? And what are these unforeseen renovation costs might be? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Unfortunately, I didn't hear most of that. Hopefully someone else did, and we will try to do the best we can to answer it. I'm having a difficult time. I'm going to go to Erica and see if it's any better. Erica?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you guys?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Erica Wetzel, and I am the new PTO president here at Anne Reynolds. And I just wanted to put my input in and share with the committee that, first of all, we really appreciate everybody's hard work on this and the energy that has been put forward. But I do have a lot of concerns, and my main concern is that it's here we go again, kicking kind of the can down the road. And at this point, we already have done so much work and hard energy, great energy has been put into this. And we have so much already done and prepared and went to referendum. And I've even polled different neighbors and people in the community, and everybody is in agreement, in who I speak to, that believes that we should just proceed as is. Right now, currently, we already know roughly around the amounts and the cost for everything. And we are aware of the timeline. And yes, maybe when we start construction that we're able to, there's maybe new things that pop up as construction happens. However, we have a great plan in place. And I think it's time for us to move forward and hold the process accountable that has been voted in and everybody is already in agreement to. And it is very upsetting and concerning that here we go back to the drawing board again, and then we would have to go back out to referendum. And it just seems like the more and more it continues to go down. And at the last meeting, I believe that, there wasn't much of an answer as to what was going to happen if we did go back to referendum, or, would the school ever be built? And I feel like there's a lot of different politics involved that really need to just stay out of it. And we need to build a school for the children, and the children, they need to be our first priority. And Anna Reynolds the building itself is in such disrepair and it needs some TLC and it needs it now. And so I'm just urging the committee and the board to consider these things as we move forward and choose. And, if there is a vote tonight, to vote to continue in the direction for renovate as new. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. I'm just going to skip back. I now have Brian Haggerty's comments. And Brian, you were talking about a space waiver and the cost of new construction. That is actually all going to be covered in our next agenda item. So I believe everything that you had asked will be covered. And if not, you'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting to speak up, and hopefully we'll clarify anything that you still need some attention to. And Erica, just so you know, the building committee, I believe, is still acting, always has been acting extremely non-political. This is a very bipartisan committee. We are working together to obviously complete the construction of Anna Reynolds School, renovate as new. We are still heading down that path. Even though we are discussing this other option right now, we have not stopped moving down the road for renovation. And we're going to obviously get into greater detail on the renovate as new versus a new construction building in our next agenda item. So hopefully you could stick with us and hear it out. Jen Rodriguez, you are next. And
hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, 71 Northwood Road, Jennifer Rodriguez. I just want to echo what Erica was stating, Mrs. Wetzel, that so many of us in town came out in full force and voted to have this go down the path that it's already on, which is the renovate like new. And we want that continued. I'm one of the staff at Anna Reynolds, not just a resident in town, and my daughter attended that school as well. So I live it, breathe it, and know it well each and every day, as do many of the residents in this town who work for the school district. And we would like to see this actually happen. I've been working for the district for about 13 years, and this has been on the plate several times in those 17 or 13 years and prior to that. And it really has been something that has been kicked down the road by both sides of the aisle. And I'd really like the idea of politics to stay out of it. And I know that you said that you are a bipartisan party, and I appreciate that, and all the work that you have done on the committee as well as the other committee members. But I think that that reminder needs to be made that the public is tired of the politics and they want this to go through, and they've already voted on it and they're at a point of fatigue with the situation. So if you guys are going down that road and that work continues, thank you. I also want to thank the committee members, Dr. Brummett, as well as Mr. Smith, in providing facts and clarification to the parents and staff about what's been happening. We truly appreciate that, as so much of the things that are out there on social media and in the news seem to be incorrect. So we appreciate those efforts and that work and that clarity and transparency that's happened so far. So to your work, thank you for the committee and the bipartisanship, and those from the community that are working on the committee, and kind of stay the course, and we look forward to getting this done finally.
Thank you, Jen. If you have any questions in the future, my cell phone is 860-655-4906. You can call me anytime and ask me any questions.
I
about
appreciate
this
that. Thank
project.
you.
Okay.
Yep.
And Dana Havens, you did have your hand up, but I don't see it now. Yep, there you are. And go ahead, Dana, you can unmute and you can speak to us.
Hi, sorry, I hit it by mistake and then my iPad's taking forever to respond. So sorry, I really have nothing to say yet.
I didn't get any of that. I'm assuming you don't have anything to say right now. Okay. And you're off the call. I don't see any other hands. James, there's nothing else, correct?
Nothing else up at this moment, sir.
Okay. So we're going to move on to, we have an update now as our next agenda item on the meeting with the state that we had Tuesday. As most of you know, that are tuning into this, that myself, Dr. Brummett, Jim Giuliano from Construction Services Group, and Tom DeMoro met with the state to try to get some unanswered questions as to what happens if, in fact, we stop down the road that we're going on, is renovated as new, and move to a new construction building. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail after, but I'm going to turn the meeting over to Marnie Liska and Jim Giuliano to kind of walk us through where we are and what happened at that meeting as far as the questions that we all had as a group. And then I will come back and complete my comments. Marnie,
right,
or Jim?
Thank you, Steve. Marnie, if you don't mind, I'll because I was the one in attendance at the meeting, I can speak to what my concerns were as the OPM in regards to reimbursement and how the state views the square foot issue. I had four concerns that I wanted to bring forward. Some of my own, as well as what I heard from the building committee. The first one was clarification of the net square footage relative to what was submitted and the grant application, and as far as what was discovered from KBA and what the allowable was. The next issue that I wanted to get clarified was a space waiver as a result of the square foot discrepancy. And the next item was a new grant application if we were to change to a new school, and a new referendum, would that be required? So the first item, the square foot discrepancy, we reviewed that in depth with the state. They were a little caught off guard because they said, we thought we already went over this. I explained further when due to KBA's a review of the actual square footage and the discovery of the storage spaces, as well as the storage space up on the roof level and the boiler room. So we had a discussion around that. The state was amenable to forgiving the town as to the overage on the square footage because they didn't really see it as usable square footage other than for storage and for a boiler room. The one thing that I will say that was a little ambiguous was the square foot area up on the roof storage area, which was about 855 square feet. But all the other spaces, they felt that we can move forward with the building without any issues in relation to reducing the grant application or reducing, having a penalty against the town's reimbursement rate. With that out of the way, I did ask, should Newington want to move forward with a new building rather than a renovate as new, they kind of looked at me a little bit like, why do you want to do that? We've already given you renovation status. And Newfield spoke up and talked a little bit about the possibility of it being, budget wise might be a little bit less. However, they did say that, yes, we would have to submit a new grant application if we were going to do a new school. And the maximum allowable square foot area for that new school would be what you see on the screen, the 53,692. Then we did have some discussion about referendum and the requirements of that. They felt, however, they did say that we would have to defer to the town's attorney, but they felt that the referendum would have to be redone, or you have to do a new referendum, because the referendum that was approved previously notes a renovation status or a renovated school rather than a new school. So those are the four major items that we talked about. I feel comfortable that the state has no issue in regards to the square foot area being over the allowable. They are not going to penalize the town of Newington because of something that was built back in 1954. They understood that. I will be following up with Costa and Bob Selmer with an email in hopes to get a response from them that they are in agreement with our understanding of our discussions that we had on Tuesday the 10th. With that, if anybody, Stephen or Maureen would like to add any additional comments, please do, or Tom. But that is essentially a synopsis of what we discussed with the state.
Jim?
I would like to clarify on Marnie's slide where it says the new referendum is determined by the town ordinance. What I heard clearly from Costa was that the state legislator approved the grant or the referendum project for Renovate is New. So that he said the state legislature would require a new referendum. I don't recall ever hearing anything about town ordinance. He said it was strictly related to the requirements of the legislature who approved us as a renovate. And there was more discussed. I don't know if Steve is going to talk to that, or it looks like he's having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, actually, James, can you switch me from attendees to panelists? I'll mute my laptop.
What are you under, Steve? On your phone?
Yeah, the 906.
Perfect. Let's see. Can't move you over, but I can make your audio active.
Okay, that's fine.
So you should be able to unmute that now.
Okay, can you hear? Oh,
Feedback.
Jesus. Oh, wait a minute.
Still muted, Steve, on the phone. Okay, I lost both of them now.
Yeah, I hung up the phone. That wasn't working either. I know my phone was unmuted, but I could hear you guys actually well, but I couldn't speak.
Okay, well, you're back here now. That's good.
Okay, yeah, and actually, it sounds like I've got a better reception now. I don't know what's going on, but unfortunately, most of Jim's narrative was garbled to me. So But at the meeting, I think we discussed the square footages. Obviously, there was a difference from our initial grant application. And if I'm repeating everything, somebody please tell me. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to go on. We discussed the increase that we found when Castle Booze actually did a survey of the building. And that triggered a bunch of questions to us. So we had a conversation about that. And I went back to Colliers, and Colliers said that they knew that the space was there, but the space was non-educational space, and they felt that it didn't need to be included in a square footage. It still needs to be accounted for in the square footage for the remodel. So we have to pay to have some work done in it. But as far as penalizing us, because our building is a little bit bigger than what it should be for the number of students that we have, it wouldn't penalize us. Meeting with the state, Bob Sumner and Costa, they agreed with that. There's one area, and I believe Jim spoke to this. There is an upper level storeroom that ranges somewhere between a couple 100 feet and 1,000 square feet. I'm going to physically get up there and check that and see what the square footage is. That's still on the table, but all of the lower areas that were not counted in the initial square footage, Costas agreed that when he met with Colliers a year to 18 months ago, that they would not count that space towards our allotted space. So it doesn't go as a penalty to us, which makes a big difference down the road. We still have some areas to make up, but the conversation, I believe, was very favorable. While he said he would not necessarily give us the grant waiver for space right there, he saw that there was no reason that he wouldn't grant that as the project proceeded down the road. It's too early for that. He needs to see budgets. He needs to see to make sure that we are continuing to work with him as a partner through this, as we have from day one, and we will continue to do that. But basically what he said was there's situations with the building, because it is built in 1954. And again, for those that are listening that don't know, it was actually built as a middle school, never operated as one, but it was constructed as a middle school. So it was built to, and I believe that the square footages are still the same, was built to roughly 154 square feet, but now it occupies obviously children, which you get a space of 120 square feet for the amount of children that we have. So we have wider hallways. We have some things that you wouldn't do today that are done. And what he said is, I'm not going to make you chop off a hallway. I'm not going to have you rip down a classroom because you're a little bit over because you inherited it. So I am extremely comfortable as we work through this project. We will be able to then get this waiver fully, but there's about 3,500 square feet that is now off the table already. And I believe in 2016 or 17, the state actually changed how they look at EDA compliant issues. And in this particular building, we're going to be adding an elevator. They do not penalize you for that. So that's 450 square feet that comes off the top and doesn't go towards that count. Help me here, Jim. Did I leave anything out?
You
said
it much more articulately than I did.
We would need. I'm sorry, say that, Jim.
You were much more articulate than I was.
Costa did say that we would need a new referendum, and he said that we would need a new grant submission. And the way the grant submission goes, and again, I apologize if you covered this. I didn't hear most of what you said. The grant application would go in and have to be in to the Department of OPM by June 30th of 2022 for consideration to be on the priority list for December of 2022 for action by the state legislation sometime. Well, if we have a good year, I guess February. If we have a not so good year, March or April. But before the legislation goes out of session, they typically do all of these, and we would get that authorization that we will continue to get the grant funding. He thought that was probably, if it was the road we wanted to go down, he thought there was no reason why we wouldn't get it, but there's nothing he could do to speed up that timeline. So we would definitely lose a year. This project would be completed sometime in early summer to early fall of 2025, if in fact we decided to go with a new building versus an old building. And I don't think we've talked about dollars yet. I believe we're saving that for time tomorrow to kind of go over the dollars. So unless Marnie or Jim wants to add anything that I just said, or if any of the members, and actually we do, I see some hands up. Let's see, let me go to my, bear with me. Nothing is working well on my, James, who has their hand up? I can't see.
Superintendent Brummett does.
Okay. Dr. Brummett?
Yes, thank you. I would just add that a couple more pieces of information was that Costa said pretty definitively that nothing that was presented at the meeting persuaded him that going other than a reno was the way to go. And he was clear that the state does not allow space waivers for new construction. So if we were to go that route, anything above the state limit would be completely uncovered by a reimbursement. We asked him a little bit about the site, and he said that the state would have to approve any site where the future school would be located for suitability. Obviously, we didn't get into a whole lot of detail on that, but he said he would physically have to come out and assess that. But he absolutely was very positive about our space waivers. And my takeaway for the space above the roof, which I've been to many times, it's a stairwell that leads to the roof, and there's some minimal storage in there. And he said if it turns out to be unusable space, which I would argue it is, but I'm glad that Mr. Woods is going to go look at it, then he would also waive that. So he was very positive that these obstacles really weren't obstacles. And that's really what I took away from the meeting.
And I would agree with that assessment. He also made it clear to the group that was there that the state prefers to renovate as new versus building new, which is why they give you 10% more in reimbursement dollars. He made that crystal clear. Jim, again, or Marnie, or any of the committee members, if you raise your hand, I will be able to see it. Jim, I see that.
Yeah, no, Stephen and Superintendent Bromley, you were much more articulate in your assessment of, our conversation with Costa. I agree with everything that you said.
Okay, thank you. So if I see nobody's hand up from the committee, Tom, I know you're on the call. Would you like to walk us through where we are now budget-wise with some of these considerations in place?
Sure.
You should have screen share. Yep, there you go.
So this is a condensed version of the chart that I presented last time. And based on the conversations with Costas, a couple of these numbers have changed. It really doesn't impact the cost at all. The numbers that changed are this number, line item 2 here, the net square footage per Costa, and what he agreed to not count is changed to 62,663. So that makes your overage a little bit less. I think last time it was like 11,000 and change. So again, it doesn't affect any of the construction costs. What it affects is down here, the possible reimbursement penalty if you don't get a space waiver would be 2.9 million. And I think last time that number was 3.7 million. So these other numbers for the new don't change at all. And that's really it for the cost implications.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Tom? As you can see, if you take in the waiver that we do expect to get, the overall cost to the town to renovate as new is 14.5. We will more than likely be in that 62,000 square foot. If you decided to go down the road of building new, the cost to the town would be roughly 17.8, so about $3 million more. And I'm going to throw it out to the committee. We were pretty clear what direction we were headed in last night. I guess I'll summarize it as Mr. Costa or Diamantis said to us in the end that while he listened at length to the presentations that were made on Tuesday, this is a quote, he saw no reason to go back and second guess or change his mind on the direction that he concurred with the building committee with about 18 months ago, and that was to renovate as new versus new. There's still some unknowns in the new, and there's some pluses to the new. If there's some of the issues that we have now would go away, and the biggest one I can think of off the top of my head is the low ceilings. We wouldn't have low ceilings anymore, but we wouldn't have a courtyard. We would have a two-story building, not a single-story building. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to throw everything out on the table here. That I think presents a problem with a two-story building. You would have younger classes downstairs where your obviously cafeteria, gymnasium is, auditorium would all be downstairs, but you have playgrounds, parking, all that would be, I believe, on the second level, unless there's some way to move that building much further back than I think. We all agree that there's a bunch of rock, and the rock is probably the biggest unknown. I will share with you this. When we did our last addition up there in 1999, we blew through our entire contingency in the first 2 weeks because they hit rock. Back then, over 20 years ago, that dollar figure was close to $400,000. And all we were doing is connecting 2 hallways to the existing classroom wings and building a media center. So it was minimal. And I'm not saying that we're going to hit it, but we all know that it's there. And so there is some guesswork on where this building would be sited and what we would find then. But the biggest takeaway for me is the time, that we definitely lose over a year's worth of time. And we don't know that it'll work, and we don't know that the referendum will pass, and we need to get another grant application. And with that, hopefully, and I see the hands going up. Steve Sylvia, you got your hand up first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
So I'm obviously seeing the multiplication factors. There's the in the second column on line item 5, I see that there is 3 different costs per square foot: 414, 437, and 432. So obviously, our team thinks that it costs more per square foot to build new than it does to renovate as new. I hope that presumption is correct. And the reimbursement factor is obviously stated 48 versus 58. And the line 15 is what's just jumps up at me, which is that I get to pay more. I'm looking at the second column compared to the first column. So what I see there is that the town gets to pay more for a smaller building. I'm sorry, I'm a simple guy here, but I'm a cheap person also. So I don't see any compelling argument to go new to pay $2 million, well, $1.5 million more to get 10,000 less square feet. So I'm sorry, I appreciate the efforts and the clarifications that you guys acquired, and also for the direction that was received. But for the last meeting, I don't see any data here monetarily that convinces me to change my opinion. So I do appreciate the team and Steve, you and the members on Dr. Brummett for going to the state and having the conversation and getting the clarity. So for this particular slide, I'm still with column 1.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Dr. Brummett, your hand is up next.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to remind the committee and the folks in attendance that the Board of Ed passed the ed specifications that align with the first column. If the direction is to do new, we would have to look at that larger amount because a smaller building would not align itself with the ed specifications. And it's not that we're adding programs, we're just using the space that we currently have and predictions of some increased enrollment. And I would add that we did talk with Bob Selmer, and he asked us what our strategies were for having that space waiver for that $2.9 million that continues to be on that first column. And he was very confident. And again, they don't grant space waivers yet. They can eliminate the non-educational space, but when it comes to the other space waivers, that comes later in the game. But he was very confident that, and I've had that happen in my previous project too, similar situation in Plainville, where the space waiver was granted based on enrollment and other factors. So I really think that 14.4 will hold. But if we go the route of new construction, we've got to add square footage, or that building will be built already inadequate for the current programs that need to run at Anna Reynolds.
Is that Maureen? Yes. Yep. Mike, your hand was up next.
When we had this meeting on Tuesday, I don't think you had all the information yet, and we don't have it today either. So I think you're a little premature in going to the state. And one thing, do we have a budget for conceptual budget or schematic designs yet? Will that be in the next week or so, Tom? Or two?
Yeah, we're working on it. The plan was to present it at your August 19th meeting, but I believe that meeting got moved to the 26th. So that's when we
correct.
present it.
All right.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of questions for you. What condition is the building in structurally, Tom? These are all for you.
Actually, Jennifer, are you on the call?
Well, in
You might
order
be
to get,
more
if I may, in order to receive renovation status, architectural firm, and again, Jennifer can probably go more into detail as to what's required, but an architectural firm, I believe you had JCJ do your renovation
Well,
status.
I didn't ask that, Jim. I asked Tom, is it in good condition or bad condition? What
But
condition? is it?
what I'm saying, Mr. Camillo, is that an architectural firm has to do what they call renovation status.
Okay, so
it's been analyzed, and
Correct.
there's a statement out there as part of your renovation status.
Correct.
You have to have a statement from a structural engineer. But if the question really is how much structural work is there, and Jennifer, you can jump in anytime, but my review of the drawings, we're changing some columns that are rusted. There's going to be quite a bit of reinforcement required for the rooftop units. I don't believe there's a whole lot of other structural work other than the reinforcing and the rusted columns.
well, is there a large amount of structural restoration or shoring or modifying to structural walls?
Well, that'll
that
be
would be the
dependent
architect.
on which walls they're taking out, which I don't think we have the answer to that question today.
Right, and have we decided if we're going to talk to someone about the PCBs?
Yeah, there's actually a meeting scheduled, I believe, next week to talk about that. And I think I saw John Luby is on the call. He's your environmental consultant.
Okay.
Yeah, let Mike go through his questions and then we can bring John Luby in.
Okay, in the original budget, did Colliers have the removal of PCBs?
That I don't know. I think, Steve, you know what they carried for.
We carried $800,000 for a PCB. We knew there was PCBs in the building, and we carried $800,000 in construction cost for that remediation, as well as the asbestos that we know was in the building.
Okay, and we know the roof deck is probably going to have to come off.
The roof deck more than likely will not have any, Michael. The roof deck is only 30 years old, so the roof deck more than likely will not have PCBs in it. And John Luby will speak to that.
All right, if the walls come down and for the PCBs, was that included in the Collier's budget?
Are you talking to me or Tom?
Either one of you.
I don't know what they included.
Okay.
Do you have any idea?
And are we going to have enough time? Or are we going to have to add another summer to do the hazmat removal if it comes to that?
Depends on what it is. It depends on,
Okay.
if we're taking bearing walls out, if, are we sandblasting them? Are we leaving them alone? I don't know.
Right.
If I could answer that,
And
and maybe Jennifer could actually chime in. The removal of walls that contain PCBs is only determined based on the design intent. So I know KBA is looking at opening up some corridor walls and taking advantage of those wide corridors and using that as kind of a group learning space. But in my mind, if we find that cost is prohibitive, KBA can look at other design options to provide that same kind of space.
now, if you do PCB removal during the renovation and you're done, are all the PCBs going to be removed from the school?
We don't know that. The meeting we're having on, I think it's Monday at 11, is to have Jennifer present the current schematic design to John Luby. Actually, John has looked at it. But it depends how the town wants to approach the PCB testing.
Right.
Well, there are two approaches, so we'll know more after meeting on Monday as to what alternatives we have. And John can answer kind of the strategy question of that.
And I know the two, one is not test and just assume everything's hot. And the other one is to test. Well, with kids in the school, little kids, I think you'd want to test because they're not high school kids, they're little kids. And the other thing was when you do shore up the roof structurally, you're going to have to weld on steel that's 75 years old and it's going to have lead on it. Are we going to do an abatement for that too?
Again, all of these questions, I think, are a little premature until we get further in design.
And that will affect the budget. So if it's going to affect the budget, we should have had those answers before we went to the state. So we could say, hey, this is what we have, this is what we found, and do our due diligence to have everything in order instead of just, let's see how it goes. And if we run into it, we can figure it out then. And that's why sometimes a new school works better than opening up a can of worms. And the other thing is, if it does need to do all this remediation, will it add time to the project?
No, we've already allocated 2 summers. The first summer is allocated, we call it the enabling phase. It would be the hazmat removal as well as creating temporary classroom space.
Okay.
So we've already allocated time for that.
And when you do the temporary classroom space, are the kids going to go back to regular carpeted floors and a low ceiling, or there be no ceiling with hanging lights?
In the temporary
Yeah.
room or when they're permanent removed?
No, temporary rooms.
No, the temporary rooms will be constructed with regular height ceilings. We're looking at options, Newfield suggested maybe putting some in the gym. So we can make the ceilings as high as we want.
Okay, and the other thing is, all this money, figure $2-3 million to build temporary classrooms back and forth in the shoring of the building. That doesn't give any value to the building. It's just part of the cost of doing construction. where if we did do build a new school, you'd actually have a better product. So, what else?
I would like to point out, if I could, that
Yep.
if we do a new school, we demo the existing, we have to abate all of the materials in the building before demolition. So we will still have that cost.
Right. A lot of this work is going to be done during the school while the kids are in school. My concern is they may be affected by the noise, smells, dust, complaints from the parents. How are we going to make sure they're okay? And a lot of the spaces they're going to be in are going to be temporary.
I think Tom
I can answer
could,
that. It would be no,
yeah, and
yeah,
Tom
I don't
can.
think it'd be any different than we. Yeah,
Well,
Mike, I don't think it would be any different than we did on the other two elementary schools. We've already renovated his new two elementary schools and did a massive addition onto Martin Kellogg. Well, all three of those schools, as well as the high school, when we did the wing on there, were occupied. So, I mean,
All right.
and they do this on a regular basis. Again, that's what we hired them to do.
Right. So moving forward, and we will continue to move forward, but we need to have a budget. We need to have plans before we can say, hey, this is exactly what we're going to do. When and what time frame will we have those in? Will it be after they test for PCBs or decide that it's all going to be hot and they're going to remove everything?
Again, Mike, I don't know of anything that is standing in the way of us moving forward, other than the architect and our CM going through their normal routine of reconciling budgets as the plans move along. Everything that you've mentioned, I believe we have covered. Is there going to be dust in the building? Yes, there's going to be dust in the building. I believe all of the abatement work, and Tom, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the abatement work is typically done in the summer months or on vacation when the children are not in school. The air has to be tested, and it actually has to be tested, I believe, over a 2 or 3 day period. And the air has to be cleaned before the kids are left back into the building. So the kids will not be exposed, nor will we let them be exposed to any sort of environmental hazard. I mean, it's a construction project, and it's a construction project while the kids are in school through some of it. A lot of the work will be done through the 10-week break in the summer, and a lot of it will be done on their vacation breaks throughout the year. That's when most of the demolition and destructive and noisy work gets done.
Okay, so we're talking after the 19th, we'll have our next meeting and we'll know exactly what the budget will be, or close enough.
Well, it's a schematic, it's a schematic design budget. So we've got 3 stages of design. So it's the first, and we do a budget for each phase. So it'll continue to develop.
So Castle Booze will take what Newfield gets and then have someone else look at it. So that's what we're waiting for.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's going on right now.
All right.
It's happening concurrently.
Okay.
Newfield does their estimate, our guy does their estimate, and then we get them together and reconcile, make sure they're both understanding the same scope of work.
Okay.
So to clarify, we probably will not have all the answers on the hazardous materials in time for the estimate, because depending on the decisions that are made next week, if there's testing to be done, we certainly won't have those results back. But we will have, provisions for that in the estimate. And after our discussions with the team, we'll know what dollar values to carry.
Okay. One more thing. Because we knew we were going into this, how come the testing wasn't done beforehand? So you could have all that information.
That's a good question. The testing isn't done until we have a schematic design, because if we're not disrupting certain areas, there's no reason to test them. So the time period of doing the testing now as schematic design development is is the normal process of when you do the testing.
Okay. Because we did come up with a budget to get passed by the state so we could have a referendum. We should have known all these things because this could take us above that. We may need another referendum if it's that costly.
But it also could come below the cost, Mike.
It
It could
could,
go both ways.
right, it could, but we like to be prepared. That's all. I know surprises here. And that's, and
Okay. Are
for,
you done, Mike?
no. And
Okay.
so when Newfield came to us and said there may be a better way, they had some concerns, and I believe because their name is going to be on the project here. And if it does turn into something more than just a renovate as new, at least they gave us the option. So I applaud them. And now,
Well, again, on that, Michael, again, the committee has never directed Newfield to do this. They did this on their own.
that's right, because they were
Right
concerned.
down to day one, we told them that we were renovating as new. They chose to go down this road,
Mhm.
and so be it. But they're also, these are all assumptions. Nothing is based on fact other than what they've done other buildings on. They're doing the same thing that we did. They're building a budget on square footage prices and what their history has been on what those things cost.
Mhm.
That's what they're doing.
Okay, and then one more thing,
Okay.
the gym.
Yep.
This is for Tom. The walls are under code. And you've got to shore those up and then make them shear walls. Was that part of the budget?
Yes, that'll be part of the budget.
No,
That's
was it
described in the
part
narrative?
of Collier's budget?
Oh, I don't know that.
Okay, Steve?
I didn't hear the question, Mike. You were all garbled. I didn't hear you.
Okay. The gym walls need work and they have to be reinforced. Was that part of the budget with Collier?
Again, Mike, I'm sorry. I can't understand what you're saying.
Okay, well, I said the question, everybody heard it, and we'll see what happens. I'm done, thank you.
Okay. Can somebody repeat that question to me? I can try to answer it. I didn't hear what he said.
Steve, can you hear me?
Jim? Yes.
Okay, so he asked if the gym wall reinforcing was in the Collier's budget.
Yeah, I can't hear you either, Tom. I'm
Can you
sorry.
hear me either?
Tom?
All I heard was about a wall. That's all I heard.
Tom?
I'm gonna move on. Chris, you are next.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify exactly what the concerns are with the walls from Tom, because this is the first that, made aware of anything concerning on them. What exactly is the issue?
With the gym walls, you mean?
Correct, because this is the first time I've heard that there's any issue with the gym walls.
Well-
What are the issues that you have identified?
My guess is that when the structural engineer did his analysis, he felt that those walls needed reinforcing. We'd have to get him on the phone or on the call to describe why, but it's not unusual. When you get a building that's built in the 50s, the codes have changed, wind loads, everything has changed. So they sometimes have to beef up walls. We're doing that on another school. We're, opening up the gym walls and putting reinforcing in them.
Okay, so it would essentially be just the additional cost of adding structural steel columns into that. Am I understanding that correct?
No, I think it's masonry reinforcement, but I'd have to check with, I'd have to go back and look at the documents. I think it called for us to reinforce the masonry walls that are there.
Okay, and is this the current engineer you're referencing, or are you referencing back to the, okay,
Nope, this is KBA's structural engineer.
okay. All right, and just one clarification, if I may. It's my understanding, and this would be to Dr. Brummett or to Mr. Woods, in the event that we were to change direction and look to seek a new referendum for new construction, it's my understanding that we would have to withdraw our existing grant commitment, which in the case, if this referendum were to fail for some reason, we would not have this project as an option anymore. Am I correct in that understanding?
I believe they said we would not have that grant if we went down another pathway. Now, when they would change that, I don't know. And if the town were to do a new referendum, for sure, that would go away. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but certainly the grant goes away if we deviate our direction. And
Okay,
also
so
the
what
grant has a time limit too. It's 2 years before we've got to get some work started, or we're going to lose it that way as well.
Chris, I would agree with that.
Yeah, so we couldn't have two grant commitments for the same project with two directions at the same time is what I'm trying to get down to.
No, because once we decided to go to referendum, that basically scraps the initial grant request. So they would pull that back at that point.
And it's not something we could go back to them and say, oh, we just want to go back this way again. Am I correct?
No, I mean, I'm assuming what you're asking me is if the referendum fails and, okay, we'll go back to renovate as new. I believe no. There's other districts that are in need and would want this money. And as far as the state's concerned, if we're not using it, it's available for them to give out. So.
Okay. And one more follow-up to the, occupied school construction that would be done during the school year. Marnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but any work that would be done in any occupied portion of the building would be all run through an air scrubber system, negative air environment, which would mitigate any airborne particulates from floating around the rest of the school. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. And we won't be renovating any occupied portion of the school because each portion is completely unoccupied and 100% segregated from the adjacent areas of the school with hard partitions. We use insulation to make sure there's no air transfer, negative air machines. Tom could give you more details, but these are normal operating procedures for working in an occupied building. You completely segregate the work area.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that we would not have construction, that we'd have particulates floating around an occupied portion of the school, that they would be completely segregated from construction. Thank you.
Okay, Chris. Carol, you're next.
Well, first I want to thank the people who met with the state that clarified a lot of things for me. I still feel renovate as new is the way to go because we have no guarantee that we will get a grant if we build as new. Losing 10,000 square feet of space is huge. We need that space at Anna Reynolds. Again, 70% of the public voted in favor of this. We went through so many of these questions at the very beginning when we chose renovate as new as opposed to build a new building. Also, all the concerns about how the children, what it will be like during the renovation, I'm still thinking about right now and for the past at least 6 years, windows that don't open. So you have classrooms, especially now with COVID, where you're not getting any fresh air. All the air conditioners that have been put at Anna Reynolds were used air conditioners. So even cooling off the classrooms, some of those air conditioners were a little moldy and smell musty. The school often smells musty. The leaking ceilings, children are dodging garbage cans that are collecting the water that is coming from the roof. Worms crawl under those outside doors. So, I know people are concerned about the conditions in the future, but we also need to be concerned about the conditions that these children and staff members have lived through for the past at least 6 years, maybe even more. And I have a question for Newfield. When you did your presentation, I remember Steve, I think, was stopping the presentation and said, we're going the route of renovate as new. And now my question for you is, if we decide to continue renovating as new, are you comfortable with that? Because my impression is that you are really pushing for build a new building. So I, as a member of the building committee, want to feel confident that if we go that direction to renovate as new, which is where we had planned to go, and after listening to information from the state, are you comfortable doing that now?
Yes, absolutely. We're comfortable with whatever the town decides. As part of our, not only as part of our presentation, but the first thing we do when we get a project is to verify and confirm the budget. And that's really how this chart came about. When we were verifying the budget, we just compared it to the cost of a new school, and we just trying to bring that to your attention. So we're trying to, and we will continue to give you all of our experience and the information that you need to make these decisions going forward, whether it be renovate or whether it be new.
Okay, I understand that, but the impression I'm getting is you are really pushing renovate as new. So that's making me feel a little uncomfortable having you as part of this project. So can you convince me otherwise that if we do renovate as new and not build as new, convince me that you are really going to be working for us and do everything you can to make that building a safe, beautiful, educational environment for our children and our staff members.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we do many renovation projects, we do many new projects, and we give it our all for whatever it is. I mean, we'll do everything we can to make sure this is a successful project.
I believe what are you going to do? That didn't convince me, because I still feel that you are really pushing building a new building after everything we've heard from the state and everything you've heard from members of the public and members of the committee. I'm still not convinced that you would be comfortable doing this. So that's what I need. I need assurance that you are really comfortable if we decide to go renovate as new, as opposed to build a brand new building.
Yes, we are comfortable. Do I feel that it's the right decision? I mean, I think the numbers, all this missing information or potential, pitfalls, I think they still need to be looked at, but we're with you either way.
Carol?
Yeah, I have no comment. I really wanted more information on how you would make us really feel comfortable and convinced that you're going to do the very best for us if we choose not to build as new. I don't really think my question was answered, so I guess I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, Jeremy, you're next.
Okay, I'm trying to keep an open mind about this because I think that a new school would be amazing. I think it'd be a great idea. However, we've been spending a lot of time here talking about a lot of what ifs. First we talked about the danger to the kids being in an active construction zone. We know that this happens all the time where schools are cycled and classes are moved around. So that's not valid to me at all. I don't think that's even a concern. But what I do think, I'm just looking at the numbers here, and I think the town portion of the cost is higher. We're going to have to pay more because we're going to get less reimbursement, in addition to the abatement that has to go on in taking down a building. So I'm just not seeing here the advantage to going down a different road where there's even more uncertainty as opposed to what we're dealing with now. We have a year of work behind us now, a year and a half or whatever this is. We've talked to the state. The state's kind of surprised that we're doing this late in the ballgame. And here we go again with another town hall situation. This is exactly what happened with the town hall. Everything was fine. We tore it down. We put up an inferior building. It's inferior. There's nobody in here in this chat that can tell me that building isn't as good as, it's not built as well. And I'm just, we're going down the same path here. And that's a little concerning to me. And I think to a lot of people. So I want to see numbers. I want to see information. I'm a data guy. This spreadsheet here is not enough for me. I want more. If the new construction crew, and all these people that are behind that, I think it's great. I want to see more facts. So I don't want to say, well, we'll scrap this, have to go back to referendum. Maybe it passes, maybe it doesn't. Maybe we pay more, maybe we don't. It's not enough for me. It's politics. That's what politics is. That's the definition of politics. So when you start making promises you can't keep. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Jeremy. Mike, you had your hand up next. Mike Camillo?
All right. We'll wait for the rest of the information and what they come up with a budget and go from there. And if it goes over budget and it should have to go to referendum, we'll have to talk again about what to do next.
Is that it, Mike?
So, well, we got another couple weeks before we have everything, Marnie?
We won't have everything until construction documents, Mike.
Okay.
So it'll change along the way.
Okay. Thank you.
Round one, I'd be very surprised. The budget's going to come to exactly what our budget is, because they need to manage that budget.
Right.
And their job is to overcome any hurdles that they find and figure out a way to do it. And then if they absolutely can't, they come back to us. But again, we asked all these people if there was an issue, and there was no issues going into this. So
right.
We interviewed 4 firms. All 4 said that they could renovate as new, and our budget was efficient and sufficient.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Chris Minor. And then Mr.
Thank you.
Sylvia.
Thank you. Just quickly, I mean, I think at this point, I agree with Jeremy to the standpoint that we need to vet out any of these potential issues that have been brought up tonight. So far, there's been, what ifs or unknowns that are still unknown. And until we vet out that information regarding any structural issues with the gymnasium and, PCB contamination, which I feel we appropriately budgeted for in the early section, or at least everybody felt we did at that point, there's been nothing brought forward today that has changed that. So nothing in this meeting tonight has given us any further detailed information or specific cost than what we've already known. And I just want to clarify that to this point, we don't have any other information. So until we can vet that and say definitively, these issues will continue and these budgets will have to, continue to be reconciled. So up until the next structured reconciliation, which is now schematic design, that'll give us at least a little better detail to starting to get into the next portion, with construction. So until that happens, I think we're just kind of grasping at straws. And I think we continue to stay the course of what we had contracted everybody to do, which is to build this renovate as new project. So I would just ask that we concentrate on our efforts in that line and not focus anything else on a alternate project type. Thank you.
Steve, if I could, I'd like to ask Tom a question about his budget comparison, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tom, the construction cost per square foot that you're using for the renovate as new scenario, the 414, do you get that number from historical data from other renovate as new projects you've done?
Yes.
And do those other projects also involve hazardous material removal and some structural reinforcement? I mean,
yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Steve, Sylvia?
Thank you, Steve. All right, so Jeremy put it in a nice format. Yeah, we need more information. I haven't seen any information that makes me change my mind, as I stated earlier. We've been given the edict wrong word. We have been given the guidance and a charter and a budget by our town council and the Board of Ed and such. And much like any future projects, when the estimates really start coming in and we start to see that either we're in good shape or we're getting close to the cliff edge, we may have to decide that there are some elements that will have to be add alternates. An example, the interior courtyard. I love the design. We may not be able to afford it, okay, to stay within the charter that we have. So, I mean, we're not at a point to make those types of decisions, and we certainly haven't got enough information to change the course that we're on, as Chris and Jeremy have stated. So at this point, I am looking forward to the meeting and finding an outcome from the environmental consultant and what their recommendations would be. And I'm sure as more information comes forth, we'll be able to make a much clearer decision. But it's certainly, I'm still convinced we have not enough information to change the course we're on. So at this point, I'm quite convinced that we're in a good thing. The last thing I want to try to bring up is Carol, I have full faith in Newfield, and there's the part of me, and this is my DNA, and I'm speaking for myself. I appreciate when a member of my team comes forth and says, hey, I think I have a better idea on how to peel a potato or to accomplish the goal and objective. I want to hear it. I want to be able to vet it and discuss as we are. I don't think there was, I think they're very committed to supporting us. And they have a very strong professional record of supporting their customers. So though I understand the trepidation in your questions, I don't have that. And I fully support Newfield and their commitment to us. So again, I'm sharing my perspective only. It's my opinion. But I don't have the same level of trepidation that you may have. Hope that you were hoping for a better answer. But these types of conversations I welcome because it's fully vetted, it's fully transparent to the participants that are sitting in and listening, and they're able to understand all of the types of decision points and discussions that we're having so that the community in its entirety will be able to support the product that we're going to deliver. So I'll get off my soapbox. I'm starting to sound like a BOE member, but thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve. I think we have one more hand. Is Mike Camillus is back up. Mike?
Hey, Steve. I'm just asking these questions because it doesn't seem like anybody else is, and I needed the answers to them. So any which way this goes, I support the Anna Reynolds project. So I just want to hear all the information that's out there, and hopefully we get it soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Here, Mike. I
thank you,
agree
Mike.
with you. I appreciate the questions that you've
And
been
Mike,
listening.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking questions and questioning the process. I really do. But I do agree with the other speakers to date here that we still, I believe, need to stay the course. I don't know that we want to take action. I think we're just going to stay the course and let's see where we end up with this first round of budgets and see if there's anything major that needs to be readjusted or needs to be addressed. But I think that the KVA and CSG, as well as Newfield, march down the path of renovate is new. And if something comes up through this first phase of budgeting that is alarming, then we'll address it then and we'll have to go back to the council. I don't see that happening. And I hope that it doesn't happen. And I believe the team that we have in place will make sure that it doesn't happen. But we need to get those numbers, and we'll have those, I believe, on August 26th, I believe, is the date of the new meeting. So the next meeting will actually also be a special meeting. We just couldn't work it out for the 19th because of scheduling conflicts, so it had to get pushed. But you know, in a good way, it gives KVA and oh, excuse me, CSG and Newfield more time to make sure they've worked everything out, and when they present to us, they'll have all the answers to our questions that we're going to have. Chris, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just one final comment real quick, Steve, if you would. On the comparison that's currently up on the screen now, if you go back to the initial JCJ analysis that was done at the beginning of our committee's time together, pre-referendum, it showed a net increased cost of new construction to be $1.6 million. And if you look at the numbers as they're presented today, are almost identical to what was proposed and presented then. The only difference was they did not take into consideration an additional 6,000 square foot that would be required for the programming requirements for the school. So I would just like to point this out publicly that this is not new information. This is exactly the same information that we've had all along. And I have no problem with vetting anything out in terms of increased cost of unknowns that may potentially creep up on us. But hopefully we budgeted and vetted our budget previously to come up to the point where we stay in budget without getting out too far. So my last comment is just stay the course and let's just find out the information definitively without just making assertions anymore at this point. Once when we can factually state something, let's bring it forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Jeremy.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry to go twice here, but I think everybody, invested, everybody here is quite invested in this project. I get passionate about it because I see a lot of red tape, but I realize that the red tape is important. And I'm glad that Mike asked those questions because it's worth thinking about. This is a big investment for the town. It's worth looking at this building and all the other buildings in town too, because as we all know, they're all in, the majority of them anyway, are in disrepair, and it's been going on for a long time that way. So it's worth looking at, building a new building, and then you have to worry about this for another 40, 50 years. However, if it's going to be a lesser product, it's going to be a smaller product. We just need more details. We still need that data. I think we forge on with what we've been doing until things come to light. Today, I didn't feel like anything new came to light. I just didn't. But I'm glad the questions were asked. Ooh, lights went off. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Jeremy. Actually, as I stated earlier too, before we move off of this, we do have John Luby, who is from Enviromed, and I think we should give him a 5 to 10 minutes just to kind of walk through. He has an intimate knowledge of our building and what we can expect without trying to put him on the spot. I think he's going to probably talk just in generalities. Is he still on? I believe he's still on the call. I saw him there.
I am.
So
can you hear me?
Yes, I can, John. So if you
I'm
would
the
like to
first
take.
one you can hear.
Oh, I see you right there. So go ahead and if you could kind of walk us through.
Yeah. Am I permitted to share a screen?
Yes, you are. You should be.
Let's do it. Okay, can you see what I have up?
No, I just see you still.
You
should be able to.
How about that?
Nope, still just you. James, are you still with us?
I'm here and sharing is enabled for everyone. Oh,
Does
there
he
he
have the
goes.
ability to screen share?
Yep,
Did I get
everybody
it now?
said it's coming up now for him.
Yay.
Yep, there you go, John.
All right, so I'm John Luby, I'm environmental engineer for Enviromed. I'm going to talk about PCBs in schools in general, and then in particular about Anna Reynolds. So PCBs are primarily used as a caulk additive 1950 to 1980. They acted as a plasticizer for the caulk, made it last longer. They're also used in fluorescent light ballasts and capacitors as a dielectric. The problems with PCBs in the schools is the use of PCBs in caulk, paint, waterproofing, roofing, etc., not permitted by the EPA. If you test for PCBs and PCBs are found, they must be remediated. They can't remain in the school building. Number two, PCB disposal is expensive. We're talking about $5,000 per dumpster for one type of PCB and $10,000 for another type of PCB. So it can add up, especially if you have a lot of masonry going out. PCBs in caulk are mobile within the masonry around the caulk. They can leach into the surrounding brick from the caulk and create an issue for removal. From a health perspective, PCBs can also outgas inside of a school and become an indoor air quality problem for the school and for the students within the school. So there's a health angle to this as well. Where do we look for PCBs? We look in 1950 to 1980 vintage schools or additions. That's when it was used in construction. We also look in schools built prior to 1950 that have been renovated since then. State of Connecticut education policy for PCBs. You must address PCBs in caulk in particular in your renovation demo plans. And you have to certify with a letter that you have done that from the superintendent. How you address the PCBs in your school is up to you. There's a variety of options for addressing them. So you have some decision points to make with my assistance. The state does not want to see change orders during construction submitted to them saying we found PCBs. Oh, our hands go up. We're frustrated. We want more money. They don't want to hear that from you. Okay, now let's talk about PCBs at Anna Reynolds in particular. All right, the first thing we have is we have to address PCBs in caulk for our portion of the school that was built in the 1950s, which is the original core of the school. There's other portions of the school built in 1980s and 1990s, which are exempt from the PCB any PCB testing or requirements or dealing with those during construction. All right, what we have going for us at Anna Reynolds is that the window wall systems in the classroom wings were previously abated in the 1980s. So all that mass of window walls with the aluminum and the glass and the caulking was all removed back to the opening then. So that plays into our decision about whether to test or not. Also, the rest of the windows and doors in the 1950s core building were replaced during that renovation in the 1980s as well. So we have, virtually all the windows and doors in the 1950s buildings were previously replaced. So that means there's not a lot of window or door material that would potentially have to go out as PCB waste. The risk in testing for PCBs in the caulk in the 1950s would then be related to the requirement to remove masonry around the openings for those windows and doors due to leaching of PCBs into the brick around those openings. So if we test, we run a risk that we're going to have to remove portions of the masonry around those windows and doors. I think that the economics in this case lean towards yes, testing for window and door caulk at Anna Reynolds School due to the reduced quantity of potential disposal costs for that material. The second item we have for consideration for PCBs at the school at Anna Reynolds is waterproofing. So PCBs are frequently found in either the waterproofing on the foundation or on the waterproofing inside of the space between the brick and the CMU walls on the school. With this project, from what I've seen in the SD design, we're not making a lot of new penetrations or additions or anything on the building. So we have a very limited impact to the skin of the building and potentially any waterproofing materials. So in this case, the economics tell us, let's not test for PCBs in waterproofing at Anna Reynolds School. Because if we did, then the potential would be there that we have to take the whole skin off the school, and that's going to cost us a lot of unplanned money. So we do not, my recommendation is not to test for PCBs and waterproofing on the school, and just at the limited locations where we need to put new doors or windows or elevators or what have you, we'll assume that material is PCB containing, and we'll just absorb the cost of that disposal. The next item we have is on the roofing. The roofing on Anna Reynolds School is fortunately circa 1985. So that's after the 1979 PCB ban. So the roofing in this case at the school would be exempt from having to test. So we're not going to propose to test at all in the roofing systems on Anna Reynolds schools for PCBs. The only thing in question on the roofing would be if you have any tectum decking in the school. I believe most of the decking I've seen in the 1950s core building is like a gypsum concrete type of plank decking on the supporting the roof. So that type of decking is not suspect. If we do have tectum, say in the gymnasium or another area, then that would be a material that's suspect for PCBs. If you're considering replacing that tectum deck, then you would have to test for PCBs in the tectum. If you're just making new mechanical penetrations, electrical penetrations for roof mounted units and so forth, then the better course of action in that case is to just assume it's PCBs in your tectum deck and just treat it as such when you're making your penetrations. The next item is PCBs and paint. PCBs and paint is a little trickier. It's not a pure economics issue, because with PCBs and paint, PCBs can off gas into the school and cause an indoor air quality problem in the school for young children. So that weighs into it. We also have the economic side weighing into it as well. In the case of Anna Reynolds, we have a lot of demising walls, and the classroom walls are being demolished. So that's, if we were to assume that that paint is PCB, that would be some larger dollars for the disposal of all those demising walls. In our favor, we have in the hallways, the primary wall finish material in there is a glazed block wall, unpainted. So that's a good thing for when I see that in the walls. I say, well, there's no potential for PCBs on all of those surfaces. So when I put together the fact that we're taking down a lot of the walls anyway, and a lot of the walls are not painted, and that there is a potential health concern, then and I also hear at this meeting that there's a gym structure upgrade potential on those painted walls. So in that case, I'm leaning towards yes, let's test for PCB in the paint in a Reynolds school and then deal with it. The next item is flooring mastic and vinyl-based glue. PCBs are known to occur in older flooring mastic that's original to the school, and also in vinyl-based glue. In this case, Lou and Company have taken out most of the original flooring in the school. So I'm not anticipating us having a problem with PCBs in older flooring mastic in the school. There is a selection of areas such as the gym that still have the original flooring. So we can do an assumption, of PCBs in the flooring mastic in that area for the gymnasium. I'd also recommend not testing for PCBs in the vinyl-based glue in the 1950s section. We're going to be probably picking up on the removal of the vinyl-based glue if and when we remove the paint on the walls. So that'll pretty much get washed out in the bathwater. The next item is PCBs and soil. Okay, there's two factors that would drive us towards testing for PCBs and soil. The first is whether we're doing any excavating around the school perimeter during the renovations and exporting soil from the site. So if we're going down, trying to improve the drainage around the building, and we need to dig down around the renovation, some of that soil is going to get exported. So the sites that accept the soil won't accept it without testing for PCBs. So that would push it towards testing the soil. The second consideration there is whether windows and doors were changed out in the school's history during a time period when there weren't a lot of controls over the removal of windows and doors. And we have a checkbox for that one because we did window and door removal back in the early to mid 1980s. And the controls on that type of environmental activity were not good at that time. And so there's a good chance that we have residual caulk and those kind of products inside the soil. So our recommendation is to yes, screen the soil around the perimeter of the school for PCBs in the soil and then deal with it appropriately. Other materials that sometimes pop up for PCBs are like are primarily associated with having PCBs in the air in the school. And there's a number of materials that can absorb PCBs in the air, such as the foam in your chair, the auditorium seating foam, the fiberglass pipe insulation, spray fireproofing. To date, we haven't done any testing for PCBs in the air, so I don't know if that is a concern in the school. If we were to find PCB in the paint, then I would lean towards testing for PCB in the air and see if we have a larger problem with accessory materials. So that's my 5-minute.
Okay. Thank you, John. Again, I just kind of wanted to give you an overview, mainly just to hopefully the people that are listening at home get an understanding that what we heard from you tonight actually is nothing new. We knew that most of this material was there at some level. And again, we don't know exactly the extent until we do some of the testing. And we will, I believe there's a meeting next Monday set up with you and the professional team to decide how we're going to move forward on that. So I just wanted to give the committee a bit of an overview that, again, we knew about this. And it's not a new finding, and we will address it appropriately and make sure that we are, the building is, I believe the building is safe now, because I believe Lou has done some testing over there over the years, and we will continue to make sure that we ensure the safety of all staff and students at all times. Mike, I see you have your hand up.
Mike,
you're muted.
Mike,
Mike.
muted.
You
There
said
you go.
that Lou's been doing testing over the years, and could we get copies of those reports and see what they are? And I have a question for Mr. Luby. What are the health problems caused by PCPs? We've heard about them for years with transformers and paint and caulking and everything. Is it cancer, birth defects? What happens when you have exposure and it makes you sick?
PCB is a carcinogen. You won't get immediate exposure symptoms to PCBs. They're usually at pretty low levels, talking in the parts per billion, parts per million in the air in a school. So it's a long-term carcinogen. You want to minimize your exposure over time so that you don't come down with symptoms when you're our age.
Is it cancer of the lungs? Is it skin cancer? What is it?
I can't tell you that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike. All right, I think unless anybody else has anything, I don't see any hands up, we're going to move on. I believe our next item is any other business pertinent to the committee. I don't think we have any, other than our next meeting would be August 26th, not the 19th. So it'll be another special meeting again at 5:15. And I don't have my agenda in front of me. I think it's public participation, or because yes. Can you put it up there, James? What's the next item here?
Public
I'm
participation
limited
is on the
because
screen.
my computers are not working.
We're all
What,
set
James?
for public participation. We do have two individuals.
Yep. Okay, so
Three
public
now.
participate. Yeah, I see we have 3 hands up now. Mike Spala, you are the first speaker.
And he should be all set to speak if he
Thank
unmutes his mic.
Yeah, if you could unmute Mike. Mike? Yeah, we'll skip down to Brian. Brian?
Hello?
Yep, go ahead, Brian. Oh. You're still muted.
Have the same goal here. Nobody is debating the condition of the school or that we are way past, doing something about it. I think that is how to best go about achieving our goal. I think that at the end of the day, once the numbers are coming in from Newfield, if you want to choose renovation because it's several, I can get behind that. I think that renovation, if at the end of the day finishes sooner than a new build, I think that's something that I can get behind. I think that if you don't want to build the new building because it's going to be 10,000 square feet less, I think that's also something I can support. Or that it's now going to be a 2-story building and the wonky, it's going to I don't necessarily think a new construction idea should be scrapped simply because it has to go back to referendum. Last night, the town voted nearly 3-1 to spend almost $18 million to renovate the building. I'm not sure what the source of doubt or concern is that if asked again, the town would then reverse course and say no to spending an equal amount of money to build a new building. I think the town fully supports whatever path is chosen. So I'm just not sure why there's such concern about returning to referendum. As far as the state grant is concerned, again, I don't know what the source of concern or doubt is there. It was a gamble in December, and it was just as much as of a gamble now. The state could have said no in December, and they said yes. I'm not sure why the state would say no, asking for less money. I think they would be incentivized to actually say yes, but either path is chosen. I fully support the town and this committee in whatever they decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I didn't get the gentleman's name or his address.
Oh, that was Brian Haggerty.
And his address?
Can you hear me or?
Yeah, go ahead. What's your address, Brian?
Sorry, 529 Fenn Road. My apologies.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Jen Rodriguez.
Yeah, so I didn't think I'd.
Go ahead.
Again, if I could get her address, please.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah, give me a
71
name and
Northwood
address.
Road.
Thank you.
Jennifer Rodriguez,
Yep.
71 Northwood Road. I didn't think I'd be in
Thank you.
agreement on the first half of what Mr. Sylvia had stated in terms of, you reassess as you go. And if you find within your budget that you have to kind of scale some things back, then that's what you do, like any renovation that you might even do on your own home. That's going to come as we go, as long as we try to stay within our budget. I think the town has already spoken. I think that we've already gone to referendum and the cost of that referendum. And I think overwhelmingly the town has already spoken that the path that was chosen and vetted by this committee was the path that they supported. I also agree with Mrs. Duggan on that. I do not feel that the current manager of the construction or the company is really invested in taking that path that was already made by the committee and by the town. The wishy-washy vocabulary that was used, that they would continue to look into or whatever it was, that work was already done. The job that they were tasked with was the renovate as new, and that is their responsibility to do. So, that's my feeling as a town member, as somebody who voted in the referendum moving forward. I did have some questions on the PCBs, and in listening to it in terms of the paint, when I attended Anna Reynolds School back in the late 70s and early 80s, there was no paint on the wall. So I'd be wondering if we would even need to assess the paints on the wall if it was done after a certain time period, like the caulking and the window replacements and those kinds of things that were addressed. There was conversation about it possibly being in foam or what have you in the auditorium. That is not something that I believe that we have, because we don't have seating in our auditorium like a middle school might have or a high school might have. And I'm wondering if our yearly air quality test that's done would have already shown whether there were PCBs, and if we need to go down that route, if our air quality tests already show that has not been a problem historically. The other number that I find interesting, and I think one of the consultants kind of spoke to it when she asked the question of that $414 cost for renovate as new, that was historical numbers used by the company. And within those historical numbers, they've come across things like PCBs and having to change course and adding and removing things that had to be taken from budgets and contingency plans that are built into budgets. So that $414 for the renovate as new, to be clear, if I'm understanding it correctly, has all those contingencies and worries and PCB removals and those kinds of things based on the history of the company. So I can't foresee that number would be so greatly out of whack if we're also finding PCBs and having to remove or abate other items. So kind of going down this road of going back and forth, I think it's very confusing for the families in town, the constituents who already voted for this and said, this is what we want and how we want it, and we agree with it. And it just feels like still a lot of politic playing. I appreciate the questions that have been made and the efforts made to provide clear facts to the public again, as opposed to kind of like this runaround that we've been hearing in the past week or so. So that's it for me. If anybody's able to answer those questions about the PCBs or the concerns there.
Okay, thank you, Jen. As far as your questions about the PCBs, that'll all come out with the testing. We're going to meet next week and decide how we move forward with the testing. And more than likely that report will hopefully be able to be made available on the 26th. If not, it would be the following meeting after that. We typically meet as a committee on the first and third Thursdays of the month. Amy, you are next. And Amy, if you could give us your name and address.
Yep, my name's Amy Parati, 175 Hillcrest Avenue. Carol Duggan touched upon this a little bit, but I would also just like to reiterate that as a parent with a child in the school, I definitely can appreciate the concern for our children as it pertains to the noise, dust, temporary classrooms, disruption, etc. But I can assure you that the current conditions that some children have had to deal with is not much better. The worms, the raining ceilings, the waterfalls, just the overall condition of the school. We as a town voted knowing that this was a renovation project, and we knew that the renovation would be going on during the school year while the children were occupying the school. We knew there wasn't a plan to have them move out of the school. We knew they would be in there. The children will be okay. They will be fine. They're resilient. Please don't keep trying to switch gears to further delay them getting the school they deserve. I think, as a town, we voted on renovate as new. We knew what we were getting into. We would like to continue as such. I also wanted to just ask a question regarding the budget. I'm assuming, as any good project manager budget people do, they add in contingency for unknowns. I vaguely recall, and I hope I'm right, that Colliers did put in a large contingency for the unknowns. Could be PCBs, any structural issues, anything that came up that they were not aware of when the estimate was put together. I'm assuming Newfield's doing the same. And one last thing, Mr. Camillo mentioned the referendum, that we would have to potentially go back to referendum again. The referendum that we voted on was the out-of-pocket for the town was $17.75 million. The budget presented here has the town paying under $14.5 million. So it doesn't make sense that this, oh, we're going to have to go back to referendum anyway, keeps coming up, because I trust that the committee and the architect and everybody who has a say in the budget will do what is needed to be done to make sure that it stays on target at that lower $14.5 million. And it doesn't get all the way up to 17.75. But, if it does, obviously we'll have to go back. But I think the likelihood of that is very slim, because the people in charge and on the committee are doing a good job making sure that everyone wants to stay on budget. So I just wanted to point that out. So thank you to the committee and everybody for all your work. And I fully support continuing down the road of renovate as new. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And to answer your question quickly, yes, there are contingencies in place. The CM has a contingency as well as the owner, and there's actually a separate line item for abatement in the owner's budget. So I believe we are covered. Dana, you are next. If I could get your name and address.
Hi, Dana Havens, 113 Stoddard Avenue. Did you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Dana.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. Okay. I just wanted to start by saying that I'm happy to hear that you guys are not trying to make a decision one way or the other today, and that you're waiting to get more information. I also truly believe in my heart that when we voted yes for this renovate as new, we were just voting yes for the children. If they had presented a brand new building or a renovation, we would have done it. We have learned that this school needs help, and we want to make sure the kids have a good school. So I wouldn't worry about that vote. I am concerned. You say that, you have built-in contingencies. Hate to bring it up, but, we said the same thing about Town Hall, and look what happened to us. Much smaller building, a lot of things we didn't get that we were supposed to get. So we can't, not knowing what's coming up the line, we can't be sure that what we have built in is going to be enough to give us what we want. A couple of other concerns I have is I heard it last meeting and I heard it again, and some of the comments that some of the committee members are making are saying, basically equate to, oh, I don't want all this work we put in to be a waste of time. I'm sorry, if new things come up and it's affecting our children, it's never a waste of time. If we have to wait a few more months for something, I think it's well worth the wait. I was also very concerned and sad to hear the accusation that this is political and that CSG wouldn't do their best. Their job is to run the numbers. And when they ran the numbers, they said, hey, there's a potential, build as new, it's going to cost them more money. Here's building a brand new building, let them see what they are, and then let them decide. That's all they're doing. And to imply that they would do less of a job if you didn't follow take one way or the other is I believe very wrong. And politics, I can't believe you're bringing politics into it. CSG isn't part of our political arena here in town. Yes, we have some politicians on the committee, but if you look at it, it's only one guy who's more nervous than the rest. So please, people, keep politics out of it. And that's it.
Okay, Dana, just before you go, so you know, it is not CSG, it is Newfield, is a construction company.
Okay.
CSG is the owner's rep, that's all.
I'm sorry, I knew I was going to mess it up because I don't really know who the players
That's all right. Yeah, that's okay.
All right.
Mike S., please. And if I could get your name and address, Mike.
Hello, this is Mike Spala. I live at 35 Gilbert Road.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
So I just wanted to actually just had a statement I wanted to have on record, and then also a question just to clarify something with the timeline. I want to thank the committee for all the work that they've done, because clearly this is an important issue in this town. But again, I know we like to say that politics isn't involved, but there are clearly some very strong feelings from certain members, and I will certainly give Mr. Camillo a chance to respond if necessary. But It just almost feels like he's trying to monopolize the meeting with the questions and the undermining is not the right word, but I feel like there's a lot of second guessing of the work that's been done by the committee over the last few years to get this thing done. And clearly, as everybody has stated, the town has overwhelmingly approved to move forward with this project. I did send an email to the town council, the mayor, and Dr. Brummett the other day. I thank you guys for your responses. What I wanted to have clarified, you said that if we had to reapply for the state grant, we wouldn't be able to submit that application until June 2022. Then it could possibly be voted on as early as December 2022. I have an email yesterday back from the mayor that said if any change in the project were to happen, it would in no way affect the timeline of the completion of the project. And I'd be willing to share that with you guys. So I'm just curious, if we had to wait an entire year or 18 months for submission and then approval of the new grant, how would that not affect the timeline? And again, I'd be willing to share that with you as well.
Yep. So just to the grant application, it is the deadline to get the grant application into the state is June 30th. And then December 15th, December 20th, that's when we find out if we are on the priority list that makes it into the legislation for funding. Okay, so those are the deadlines that we can't change. So yes.
And I understand that. I guess my question is, if that is the case, if that's the timeline, which we have no control over, how does that not in effect push out the timeline for construction of the project?
And all right, so let me finish now. So it would push the timeline out, and I believe maybe you weren't on the call earlier, but I started the meeting with this. It pushes the timeline out to approximately September of 2025, not 24. So it does push the timeline out.
So the response from the mayor's
right
office
now
was incorrect then. The email that I have responding from the mayor saying that this isn't, political gamesmanship and nobody's looking to stall on the project would then be incorrect, because
again,
she said this one in no way. No. And that's why I said I'd be happy
yeah.
to share the email with you guys. I'd be happy if you reached out to me after. I did send an email to the entire town council, so I'm sure you guys have my email. But I was just a little bit concerned because my biggest fear, and full disclosure, I have a daughter who's going to start attending Anna Reynolds this fall. I have a son that's going to be attending in the next 2 years. And my biggest concern is if this gets pushed out, it'll be lucky if my daughter sees the final school. But, it concerns me that my son might still be in a school that we're going down the same road over and over and over. So the response from the mayor's office was that this would in no way affect the timeline. So I just wanted to have that clarified, that this would indeed push the timeline back.
That is how I understand it. I will have a conversation with the mayor to make sure that we're on the same page so we don't send mixed messages. Okay, Mike?
Thank you. I truly appreciate it. And like I said, I'd be willing to share it if you need to contact me. Thank you.
Next, I see is Dana's on the list, but if it's the same Dana as last time, I'm going to skip over you. Is it Dana Havens again? Yes? I'm assuming yes. So I'm going to skip down to, is Michael? Mike S? Oh, no, maybe Mike Fox.
You're exactly right, Steve. It's Mike Fox, Michael Fox.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Main Street, Newington, Connecticut. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I cannot see you changing direction because, as you just said, there's no way that if we had to have another referendum, which may or may not pass, it probably would, and having then to wait until, I think you said June 2022, it would have to push it back. But I'm just as worried about the time frame, the time that would lapse between the referendum approval and the time we go for the grant. I think you actually said this during this meeting, that I'm sure there are plenty of districts that would like to get their hands on that money. So who knows if we'll get it at all. That's really my major thing. Everybody else that has commented had talked about the PCBs and other things, and I agree with that. But right now, I don't see any reason to build new rather than renovate new. After all, we did vote 3-1 to do it this way. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Scott, you are next. You got to unmute, Scott.
Sorry about that. Sorry
There you
about
go.
that. It just popped up on my phone saying unmute. So Scott Groskowski, 46 Miami Avenue. In response to the Mike that called before, Mike Fox, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, building as new would be a lot faster than renovating as new. Just building a new building is a lot faster. Anyways, the real reason I'm calling is about the PCBs. And I seem to recall Dr. Collins saying a couple years ago that their way of testing was by asking the teachers if they thought the air was clean or not, and that no actual chemical tests were done. I seem to remember me saying, well, why don't I just buy a test and walk into the school and slap it on a wall and see how it does, and being threatened with arrest for trespassing in the schools. Is there any tests that are done? Is there any paper trail of actual real tests showing what the PCB levels have been in the school over the past 5 to 7 years? Where can we get them? Is that something I have to FOI? I'd be interested in seeing those. This is the safety of our kids. And finally, I think, Mr. Woods, I agree with you that we should continue forward as we're going. But I also believe that we should look at every avenue to see what's best for the kids. If that's a new school, I'm all for it. If it's renovate as new, I'm all for it. It's just, we need to know all the answers. And I'm glad you guys are sort of waiting while you're waiting for the plans to come in to see what's the best way of doing it. And that's my comments. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Scott, to your question, yes, it is faster to build a new building, but there is a timeline delay because of approvals. So if in fact the new building was decided is decided the path we take, it will take another year. It doesn't take longer to build it. It takes longer to go through the approval process. So if I misspoke or you misunderstood me, I hope that clarifies it. Phil, Kay, you are next. If I could get your name and address. And you need to unmute, Phil.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi, my name's Phil Knowlton. I live over on 44 Cinnamon Road. I'm over in this district.
44 what?
Cinnamon Road.
Okay, go ahead, Phil.
Yep. So I live over here in this district. I've been over here for 3 years. Before that, for about 15 years, I was over in the Patterson district. I have 2 older kids that went through Patterson, which got renovated, and I don't think there was ever as much of a fight as what you're seeing these last couple years. My kids did really well through there, went to Wallace, went on through the high schools, and now have scholarships at UConn. I've got a 3-year-old that's going to go to Anna Reynolds because I moved into this district in about a year or 2. I've got twins coming in 2 weeks. They're going to go to Anna Reynolds. I really hope that all the people that I've heard tonight tell me that they have the best interest for my kids. Really try to take a look in the mirror and stop putting up the hurdles that they're presenting by asking all these questions for all these hardworking volunteers on this committee who are chasing down answers so that they don't look like they don't care. These people that are working hard, trying to get renovated new, do care about my kids. I trust the fact that they are asking the right questions. Please don't get distracted by these people that are asking questions at the last minute, trying to derail this. I really hope that you do renovate as new. I think that, we will be able to get those waivers. I believe that, and I appreciate the fact that you guys went to the state and had conversations with them. And I have faith that you'll get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And that wraps it up for public comment. The next item on our agenda is comments by building committee members. Anybody? Go back to, and who? Steve Sylvia. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. I do appreciate all the comments that the public participants provided. And I'd like to reiterate that, again, this is me as a personal individual. I welcome every member's questions and every member's concerns. And the questions that have been presented this evening were presented, in my humble opinion, with the kids in mind. And even though it's trying to has the appearance of promoting a certain outcome that they believe strongly in, I welcome that type of challenge to the decisions and that have been rendered to date. No evidence thus far has been presented to change my mind of the decisions that this committee has already made so far, but I also have to look at all potential data that may come down the road and be presented. And as that comes up and we discuss it, we make the decision at that point, and we share the information with the town and the community. So I'm very confident that this committee is still moving forward with what the town asked us to do, what the community voted on and asked us to do. And I look forward to the additional information being provided by our professional team. So from that end, I don't have any apprehensions of anybody questioning if the decision was appropriate or is still valid. So to that end of it, again, it's a personal approach in my DNA. I don't have those types of issues or concerns. And I personally thank everybody on this committee of having the patience and the diligence to be able to look in the mirror and say, are we doing the right thing? At this point, I'm still comfortable, as many of us are. And I think even with Mr. Camello's questions, I know he is still committed to delivering a appropriate solution for our children at Anna Reynolds. And I really do welcome the types of questions that he's presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I can't even add anything to that, Steve. That was eloquent. You did a great job. I agree with you 100%. We're going to face a lot of tough decisions moving down the road here, but I'm confident that we're going to be able to deliver a state-of-the-art building to the students of Anna Reynolds, the parents, and the taxpayers when this is done. We're going to hit some bumps through the road, but we've got a great group, and we're going to get even more difficult challenges as the project moves forward. But we're going to work through it and get through it. And the only other comment that I wanted to make, Scott, I meant to touch base on this. I will touch base with the administration of the Board of Ed and find out if the air quality tests that they perform are available. And if they are, I will make sure that somebody emails to you in the next day or so. I see no one else's hand up. With that, a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
And I think that was Mr. Camillo, or was it Mr. Minor?
Second. That was Mike.
Okay, so Mike Camillo made it, and
second.
Steve Sylvia seconded, I believe. And I apologize for my bad audio, but we got through it. So all those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.